1. When I was about 7 or 8, my family went to go visit my grandparents in their retirement community in California. The community is made up of houses that get passed down from one owner to the next as people either die or enter into assisted living. My grandparents decided that they would let my family, mom, dad, little sister, and myself, stay in their house while they stayed in the retirement community's hotel. Although the community was charming, I had several paranormal encounters during our stay. The first encounter occurred when I woke up one night around 2 or 3 a.m. At first I thought that I was alone. However, when I turned my gaze towards the ceiling, I saw a woman's head looking down at me. I rubbed my eyes and the head vanished. Needless to say, I bolted out of the room. A few nights later, my dad decided to flip through an old family album. As he flipped through the album, he showed my sister and I a picture of my great-grandmother. She had passed before I was able to meet her. The woman strongly resembled the face that was looking down at me the previous night. Unfortunately, that wasn't the last of my encounters during that trip. A few days later, I woke up around 6 a.m. Once again, I found myself alone in the room. One important thing to note is that the room contained 2 doors. Each of the doors was on a different wall. As I approached the door nearest to me, it suddenly started shaking. Then the round doorknob started turning around. It was as if someone was on the opposite side of the door trying to get in. Perhaps even more alarming was the fact that while this was going on, the second door on the other side of the room was also shaking. Initially stunned, I finally managed to get a hold of myself and muster the courage to open the door nearest to me. When I opened the door, no one was on the other side. I walked around the house and found that my mom, sister, and dad were still sleeping. My grandparents had not yet left the hotel. The third event occurred a few days later, when my sister and I were in the room together. We were playing a game, when all of a sudden both doors started shaking and the doorknob started turning again. Although frightened, I was relieved that my sister was present and could serve as a witness. The last encounter took place when I was exiting the kitchen one afternoon. As I stepped into the living room, I saw a woman in a simple white dress, kneeling on the sofa and looking out the window, in what appeared to be a praying position. Her dress seemed almost translucent. The woman also looked like she could be a part of my family. In retrospect, I do not think any of these spirits were malevolent. My theory is that they were either family members or former residents of the home. 2. My story happened in 2013. For some context, I was staying in my grandparents' home that was over 100 years old in South Africa. I had experienced other unexplainable occurrences, like waking up one night to have my rosary wrapped around my neck, choking me. This event had left ligature marks around my neck. The strange part is, I had slept in a rosary for years, and never had anything like this happen. Other strange things that went on were doors opening on their own, the kind of doors that have handles that require twisting to open. The story I am telling you today centers around this old house. My grandparents decided to sell it as they were both in their 70s. In 2013, I was alone at home with our housekeeper as I was studying. The real estate agent showed up to the house unannounced. I opened up for her, and out stepped an older Muslim woman. With this woman were 2 little girls dressed in uniforms that matched the Catholic primary school I had attended many years prior. The one girl had the same fair complexion as her mother, while the other girl was definitely Indian, not Arabic. I found this strange, but figured she was probably a school friend. I welcomed them into the house. They looked around. As the agent made their way upstairs, the little girl who looked Indian stared at me as her hand trailed along the banister. Then I went to go unlock the other home on the property, where my uncle stayed with his family. Right behind me were the 2 little girls. They rushed into the house and made their way into my cousin's bedroom. The Indian girl was sitting on the bed, petting the cat who was fast asleep, and the other girl was looking around at some toys in the room. I told the girl on the bed the cat usually doesn't like people touching her and that she's lucky. The girl just smiled at me. Finally, the parent and agent arrived at the flat on the property where we were, so I stepped outside to give them some space. Once they had finished, they thanked me and the agent. The mother and the other lighter-skinned girl, who I assumed was her daughter, had stepped outside. I paused for a moment and eventually asked the real estate agent if she could please call the other girl to come outside so that I could lock up. The mother and the agent looked at me puzzled. "What other girl?" they asked. "I only brought my daughter," the mother responded. I laughed at them and told them that I don't really have time to joke around because I have to study for my final exams for uni. Their faces fell. I could now see that they were not kidding around. I rushed into my cousin's bedroom to find it empty, apart from the cat, still sound asleep on the bed. I tried to compose myself as I said goodbye to the real estate agent and the prospective buyer. After they left, I asked the housekeeper if she had seen who got out of the car. She responded it was just 2 women and a little girl. I know that I did not imagine this, because I clearly saw her thick black hair cut into a bob and her blue Alice band, the way that she smiled at me. This experience still haunts me to this day. Was this an apparition that followed the little girl from school? I knew I also attended that same school, so she decided to show herself to me. 3. This only happened a few days ago. So me and my sister were bored one day and decided to go ghost hunting, something me and a few family members do a lot. We decided to go to a few different places, armed with a spirit box around our area. We had a few little responses to questions or just noises that made little to no sense. We decided to go to one of the oldest graveyards in the country, that just so happened to be a few roads over from my mother's house. We get there, set up, turn on the spirit box and wait. Almost as soon as we turn on the spirit box, it starts going crazy. It starts with just repeating hello over and over again. Then, as clear as anything, says my sister's name in my dad's voice. We look at each other in disbelief, then it does it again. At this point, I tune out. I don't know why, but I just go blank like my body's frozen. But I can't look around. I can faintly hear my sister asking questions and the spirit box replying. As I was looking around, I see something moving out the corner of my eye. So me, being the dumbass I am, stupidly look right at it. And what I saw was a brown, almost skeletal creature. It was like its skin was tight to its bones. It was creeping through the trees surrounding the graveyard. I looked away before I could look at its face. I didn't want to see it. In one motion I stood up and turned towards the exit. My sister followed me without asking what had happened, just switched off the spirit box and we left. I waited until we were away from the graveyard to explain what I had just seen, and we both knew what it was. We got back to our mother's house and explained everything to her. Needless to say, she was freaked the fuck out. After a while, we had decided to do another spirit box session in the house, with our mother. It was quiet for a few minutes until it said my older brother's name, who was not there at the time. Then it switched to his voice, which is very distinctive, and it kept repeating, "Mom, help me! Mom, help me! Mom, help me!" And it sounded distressed. At this point we turned off the spirit box. And I have a lot, I mean like an unnatural amount of spirit encounters, but never anything like this. 4. I was vacationing on Cape Cod a few years ago with 2 friends, and we did the Haunted Ghost Tour, which takes you along historic Route 6A at night. Most of the places we visited were built in the 1700s, old homes, restaurants, and cemeteries. But the last stop of our tour was the oldest wooden jailhouse in the United States, built in 1690. This was the grand finale. Up until this point, all the other landmarks we visited were only saw from the outside, so it wasn't that scary. We were on public roads with cars driving by, listening to a guy share some history and ghost stories. But this was different. This time we went inside. Once you step inside somewhere with so much history and supposed hauntings, it goes from a harmless ghost tour to somewhat of an investigation. As we entered one by one through the narrow doorway, it became instantly apparent that this place was tiny. Nothing but a 12 by 12 space on the first floor where we all gathered around. There were 3 jail cells on the second floor above us, and that was it. The tour guide gave a little history of the ghosts that haunt this tiny jail, and told us that if we all remained perfectly still and quiet, we might see something. But in order for that to happen, he needed to turn off the light so it was pitch black. Upon doing so, we all silently stood there in complete darkness. He said he'd keep the lights off for 15 minutes, and to report back if we experienced anything. The windows were boarded shut so no streetlights or moonlight could seep in. The only light I could see was this tiny red LED, which was the battery light for the smoke detector. It was about 8 or 9 feet above the ground floor, tucked up near the ceiling. About 5 minutes had passed. We all remained silent, waiting to hear, feel, or see anything. At this point, you could sense the room growing a little anxious. I thought by this time my eyes would have adjusted to the darkness, but still, I couldn't see a damn thing. A few whispers and quiet chuckles from the skeptics broke out when something happened. I suddenly sensed a massive dark presence standing right in front of me. Don't know how else to explain it. Just imagine the feeling you get when your eyes are closed and someone comes up and stands right in front of you. Even though you can't see them, you know someone is there. That's what I was experiencing, except my eyes were open, and it felt like this thing was towering over me. I am 6 feet tall, and this dark shadowy presence felt like it was about 2 or 3 feet above me. The room was, like I said, pitch black. You couldn't see your own hand if you held it in front of your face. But this shadowy figure was darker than pitch black. I could see its outline. I was instantly overcome with sadness and dread. Whatever this thing was, it didn't want us there, and I was ready to leave. Moments later it dissipates. Eager to turn to my friend and tell them of my encounter, I stopped myself. I remained still and silent, just thinking, okay, I'm safe. I'm in a room full of people, and I don't want to interrupt this experience for everyone else. But holy fuck, had I been alone in that jail, you can sure as shit bet I'd be bolting for that door. At this point I was certain what I saw was real, and I was more than satisfied with getting my money's worth. However, little did I know, there was another 8 to 10 minutes left of this lights off event, and it was only getting started. 5. Back in 2008, I was a student planning to go to university and needed some extracurricular stuff I could put on my entry applications. As most UK students know, one of the best to have on there is the Duke of Edinburgh Award. As part of this award, you have to embark on an orienteering expedition. Basically, a long trek through woodland and rural villages, following nothing but a map and a compass. No GPS allowed. It's a teamwork experience, and you camp and overcome hurdles together, etc. Anyway, I was out of shape at the time, and so my uncle volunteered to take me out to the middle of nowhere to get some idea of what orienteering was like. We didn't stay out overnight like what I would have to during the real thing, but we hiked maybe 10 miles through the woods and a small village in pretty abysmal weather. By the end of the journey, we were soaked to the bone and pretty miserable, looking forward to getting back to the car and heading home. For the last part of the journey, we were on a dirt trail, heading uphill with bushes and trees on either side. We were marching onward in silence at this point, when all of a sudden there was a rustling in the foliage to our left. From behind a large bush stepped an old man in a black suit, with a red bow tie and dress shoes. He looked late 70s, early 80s, very pale, liver spots dotting his face, and a grey and white comb-over. I was instantly weirded out. Who dresses like that to go into the woods? The instant thought, seeing a guy his age out there in those clothes in those weather conditions, was, this guy has lost his marbles. There was something else that took me an extra moment to notice, though, that puzzled me. The guy was bone dry, didn't even have mud on his shoes. We stopped in our tracks and just stared at the man for a moment, who appeared to be as frozen and shocked at seeing us. My uncle made the first move, making a step towards him, asking if he was all right. The old man continued to stare for a moment, not even moving a twitch, then became suddenly very animated. It was like he suddenly snapped out of a trance. He started flailing his arms wildly, saying something awful had happened, that a good friend of his needed help. He began walking backwards into the woods, motioning for us to follow him, which we did. We started off at a brisk walk, then escalated to running, as we struggled to keep up with the old man. After maybe a minute he disappeared ahead of us, but we could hear him, so we continued to follow the noise until we reached a huge slope. We stopped at the edge and looked down to see the old man standing at the bottom, motioning us, pleading with us to follow him. I remember looking down, and the slope was probably at a 40-degree angle, spanned for perhaps 50 feet or more, and slick with mud. It looked like an accident waiting to happen, especially given there were no shrubs or roots to hold onto or anything. I remember looking down at the old man on the other side of the slope and wondering, how the heck did he cross that so quickly and so cleanly? I mean, at that distance, it is hard to see the fine detail clearly, but I swear he still did not appear to be wet or muddy at all. Me and my uncle looked at each other, and I saw that he was getting as weirded out as I was. Despite my feelings, I made a step toward the edge and was going to try and make my way down, when my uncle grabbed me firmly by the arm and pulled me back. Under his breath, he said to me, "Something's wrong here." We took a few steps back from the edge at this point, and the old man at the bottom started getting irate. He began pleading with us again to come down the slope, telling us he needed our help, his friend was in trouble. My uncle shouted down to the old man that we would head back to our car and call emergency services for him, that professional help would be on its way soon, that they would have all the tools to help him, etc. The old man got suddenly furious. He began jumping up and down, demanding that we come down the slope right now, or there would be hell to pay. His voice had changed drastically. He was practically growling his words, his hands bunched up into fists, pounding his knees like an angry toddler throwing a tantrum. I've never seen a grown adult fly into such a rage in my life. His eyes looked like they were on the verge of bursting out of their sockets, his skin gone from pale to red in almost an instant. We began to hurriedly make our way back the way we came, his demands and threats getting less audible as we got closer to the trail. Once on the trail, we practically power-marched the remaining quarter-mile or so to the car. All the while, my uncle was on the phone to the emergency services explaining to them that there was a possible mentally ill old man wandering the trail. We were ordered to get to our car and await the police, so we could show them where we had encountered him. About an hour later, we met 4 officers, 2 whom had dogs with them and packs of supplies like first aid, emergency blankets, etc. We led them to the exact spot, and then pointed the 2 officers with dogs in the direction he led us through the bushes. The search lasted all weekend, but there was no trace of the old man. Officers said the only trail they could pick up had been mine and my uncle's. They didn't find any footprints, or anything belonging to the old man we encountered. One of my weirdest experiences to date. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 5 True Paranormal Stories, episode 108, and thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. I just want to let you guys know, there won't be any stream this weekend. I'm putting the streams on hold for a little while, just while I get the old throat issues fixed out. Like I say, I'm going to wait a couple of weeks before I contact a doctor, just to make sure it's not a viral thing. If it is, it'll fix itself. And if it's not, then we'll need a bit of medication. But, so sorry about that. I do enjoy doing them. So, just store all your questions up for when I'm able to do it again. Apart from that, I'm going to have a nice relaxing weekend. Probably watch the rest of, get this right, I always mix these 2 up. The Haunting of Hill House. I watched about half of that so far. So, well, actually more than half. I think I'm on episode 6. So I'll probably watch the rest of that this weekend. And maybe I'll start Daredevil. I haven't started that yet. Yeah, we'll always mix The Haunting of Hill House up with The House on Haunted Hill. I think that's what I said last week when I mentioned it. But yeah, I meant the other one. The one that's up on Netflix right now. Okay. And with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.